Hello, and welcome back to Environmental Station Alpha with Brian. I'm starting in this room because it has my favorite music in the game, I think. I really like this track. And yeah, I decided I am not going to play further in the game. There are, I believe, 2 more endings I could get to, a few more items and secrets, but I think it might take me like 6 to 10 hours or something to do all that. And I'm just not willing to invest that much more time in this game. But I did enjoy the game overall. But I wanted to use this episode just to give a short review of what I thought was good and bad in the game. And so I've written down some notes, and so let's go through it. First up, the good. Platforming and power-ups. This game is probably the best platformer I think I've ever played. I have not played tons and tons of games. But in terms of running and jumping and dashing and hookshotting all around, this game just nails it. There are, I guess, 14 power-ups in the game, and all of them are meaningful, and all of them have kind of an interesting kind of confluence together, the way that they work together with the dash and the double jump and the hookshot and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, even little things like the plasma field, which basically means you can kind of ignore minor enemies walking around the station because they'll get hit by these little balls bouncing around you. And things like the rough map that help you find some of the extra secrets that you were missing that are relatively minor upgrades were still meaningful and useful. But this is just a great platformer. The developer just completely nailed it, and so obviously he's built other games before in order to get that much refinement. Yeah, Hollow Knight was a really good action platformer as well, but this one just has much more interesting movement and capabilities, and so it was great. The music in this game is great. I'm listening to one of my favorite tracks, but overall the music in the game is great. I think music in a lot of games is great. There's a lot of good music in the world. The bosses. Most of the bosses were really good. They all were a bit different from each other. There were a lot of different bosses. You had to kind of learn their attacks. And for the most part, they were difficult and interesting. There are a few negatives in the bosses. One is that a lot of the bosses have just invulnerability for sometimes most of the battle, and so basically you just have to sit around kind of dodging their attacks until all of a sudden they open up for a moment and become vulnerable and attack them. And I kind of don't like that hurry up and wait kind of style of boss fight, where it's just like, okay, slowly dodge a few of the attacks, and finally you can attack them, and then slowly dodge a few of the attacks, and finally you can attack them. So that's my one knock on the boss fights. For the most part, the retry time, like after you lose to a boss, most of the time there was a save point kind of right before the boss, and so it was easy to get back in, although with some bosses, most notably Overgrowth, the kind of like beginning cutscene and time to retry the boss was just too large. But for the most part, this game has lots of bosses, and for the most part they were good and fun and different. Puzzles. I love puzzles. I liked solving the cryptogram. I like solving the riddles that hint at locations to go around the station. I liked just having the map and then seeing these open squares, and it's like, how can I possibly get in here? Oh, here's a wall that I can shoot through that I never thought of, or I have to swim through this poison in order to get to this little hidden corridor over here, or whatever. This is a good puzzle game, and that was one of the main reasons I wanted to play it, actually, was because of that. Pixel art. I like the art style of this game, with your little robot and things, and the map, and the zoomed-in version of the map. Like, I don't know. My first console was an Atari 2600 growing up at home, and then, the NES, and so that's kind of like my childhood experience, and I feel like this is kind of that old-school style, but with more refinement, a lot more color. I really like the vivid colors in this game. And despite the fact that so many of the tiles are kind of indistinct and it's hard to tell what's foreground and background, some of that's a little bad, some of it's good from the point of view of it makes it easier to kind of hide secrets throughout. But yeah, for the most part, I really like the art style in this game. And kind of related to that is the area variety. A lot of people commented on this. I didn't really notice it myself, but I guess I don't have a good sense of that aesthetic. But there's like 10 different biomes you can see on the map that all have different colors on the map. And each area feels really different, I guess. And it's not something I paid a lot of attention to, but after people pointed it out, I can totally see that. And so, yeah, and there was like a diskette with different art for each area. And so it was kind of like 10 different zones or whatever it was. And yeah, that's a really cool part of this game as well. Overall, the map layout and the hiding spots in the in-game map is another thing. Like, just the fact that fit together all these rooms, and pretty much every room had something meaningful in it. Sometimes it was just, here's a corridor that is, hard to traverse and you won't be able to go back up or realize that there's a secret through the wall over here until later in the game. Lots of things held bosses. There were a lot of these secret rooms that held the unlockers, and then maybe you had to be able to have the, dash booster X in order to actually get up to one of the unlockers or something like that. But yeah, as you fill in more and more of the map and start finding, little 1 and 2 and 3 wide gaps and holes in the map that you had to go back and fill things in, just the way it all fits together, I think, is really well designed. And then the level design, again, as just an awesome platformer. The different rooms and different like hookshot and jump challenges and different things that were around, I thought was really good. So yeah, overall, that level design and kind of game mechanics and progression of the power-ups, as well as tutorializing. Like, there were a lot of rooms when you first get the hookshot, it's like, here's some easy hookshot challenges, and then the next room over was, here's a few more difficult hookshot challenges, and there weren't any enemies in those rooms, and you just got a chance to kind of like play around with the new power-up in order to figure out how to use it. And there's also, even for basic things like platforms you can only go up through or platforms you can only fall down through, there were rooms tutorializing that, and different one-way blocks like the air currents and the crumble blocks that would drop you through. Often the first or second time that you saw those things, there was like a little tutorial room that basically helped you learn about those game mechanics. So that was all done well. Let's talk about the things that were done badly. Retraversal is the main one. Saves and teleporters. This game, at some point, relatively early on, you get to where you can get to this room that has a save point and teleport, or especially this room that has a save point and teleport that will always be open to you after that. And so at that point, like once you get to that room, they should have just made it so all teleports could also be saves. The way that it works right now is you press up in front of a teleporter to use it and up in front of a save point to use it. If they just always made it so that down was the teleport button and up was the save button, then you could have one of those stations do both things and have it be just fine. And at some later point in the game, if they had just changed it so that all the save points also become teleport destinations, so that you could teleport to a bunch more places, it would just make it so that in the late game, when you're trying to go find all of these secrets and come back to different locations, rather than having 10 places you could teleport, there would be like 20 or 30, and it would just cut down on the retraversal time, which would be great, because it also, in addition to just wasting less time, as I've talked about before, there's lots of bad guys, and there's no incentive to fight any of them. When you shoot and kill normal bad guys on the screen, they don't drop experience, you don't get points, you don't get money, you don't get anything. The bad guys are just there to harass you and slow you down. There were a very few rooms where you had to kill all the bad guys to open a door, or obviously bosses and mini-bosses are particular bad guys you had to kill. But yeah, with no incentive to fight bad guys, it was the case that after you turn on the power to the station becomes more hostile, and so retraversing the station gets a bit more interesting then. And there were also a few places where, like, after you turn off the plant growth module or whatever, like, roots grow through different places, and it kind of, like, changed the layout of the station, so you had to go different ways. And so those were good things in terms of making retraversal more interesting. But the game is so long, it's just a big waste of time at the end of the game. And so they need more teleporters and more saves in order that could just be unlocked so easily. I mean, just a few changes, tweaks, to make the save points become teleporters and just have a different action verb, up arrow and down arrow to choose one or the other so that you could choose to do one or the other, would be a very simple change. It would make the game so much better. So that's my biggest criticism. Other minor criticisms, the red herrings. There were a few rooms, there's the fisherman room that I think is labeled nowhere, that I think is called 1515, and I don't remember exactly where it is in the map right now. Right, that's where you get the rough map. I don't remember exactly where it is right now. That has a save point in it that you can't actually get to. There was the room above the reference that has a computer in it that you can't actually get to. There was the Mega Sad room that after you go through the dash puzzle was just like a little room on the side over here somewhere. That's, yeah, I don't know what it was. And even the reference, I guess, was a reference to another game. So kind of rooms that are pointless. And I kind of understand why they may have been added, because the map maker wanted to fill in the entire map. And I know this game, when it was originally released, didn't have all the content, like the research outpost was added in during a later release. And I think a few of these little side rooms that were kind of secrets, like originally didn't have anything in them, like the Hall of Buzzsaws, I think, for example. Well, I guess the Hall of Buzzsaws is above this room, but you don't actually get up through there. You get up through going through the pillar over here. Yeah, so there's a few rooms that seemed like the developer was like, if I want to add extra content, let's have this room in here, and I could add the extra content in there later. But yeah, when you have red herrings in a game that has this many puzzles, it just causes you to waste your time trying to solve the puzzle when, in fact, there isn't a puzzle there. So I think you got to get rid of the red herrings. Difficulty. This is a very difficult game. I played on normal. There is an easy mode where I think you have more health that might make it easier. I only had to cheat on a couple on the dash room and like one of the final bosses, giving myself more health. I was able to get through most of it, but it took me a lot of tries. And for a game that's a metroidvania, it's an action platformer, it's a super tough platformer, like, like a White Palace and a Hollow Knight tough platformer in certain places, has super difficult bosses, like Overgrowth that took me, like over an hour of retrying and retrying and retrying to kill. You reduce your audience of who wants to play the game when you make it that difficult. I mean, there's definitely some hardcore gamers who love this kind of difficulty. But the fact that this difficulty also comes in a game with super puzzles where you have to, like, solve a cryptogram and read a bunch of clues in order to find things, like, that's a very interesting puzzle that I know there's a bunch of people who would want to, try to solve those puzzles. But the set of people who want to solve those puzzles and the set of people who are capable of getting through enough of the game to actually be able to unlock those puzzles is a very small subset. So yeah, you need like an easy mode so that people who just want to do the puzzles can actually get there. I mentioned the fact that I modified my health. The fact that the save file for this game is just a little text file and had a line that says max health equals 30 that you could just change to max health equals 3000 so that I was able to complete the game as opposed to just being completely blocked on the dash maze that I'm simply not skillful enough to do. That was a great plus. That was a great bonus. And if you're like, I don't know, any kind of, indie developer, like it's a simple way to write a save file. And yeah, the fact that it's human editable is a great asset to folks like me. So I'm glad they did that. I talked about boss invulnerability already, and I talked about no incentive to fight the bad guys. Yeah, so retraversal, red herrings, difficulty, boss invulnerability, and no incentive to fight the bad guys were the main negatives I had on the game. But it was a great game with a lot of positives. I did enjoy playing it, but at this point I've spent enough time on it, and there are a few other things that I want to know the answer to, but not enough to spend another 10 hours. So, I hope that you enjoyed the playthrough. I'm sorry that this episode was not particularly visual. It was just me talking and reading through notes. But yeah, I hope that you guys are having a great day, and I think there possibly... I read something about possibly an Environmental Station Alpha 2 eventually. Definitely, if this developer makes another Metroidvania game, I would totally play it. Because this one is excellent, and I could imagine that they could make one that's even more excellent. Yeah. So, yeah. That's the end. I'll quit rambling. Hope you guys are having a great day, and I'm not sure what I'll play next. Bye-bye.